The obsidian doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a low hum, revealing a vast space carved from the heart of a dead asteroid. Light pulsed along the walls in slow, rhythmic waves, casting long shadows over tiered balconies filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some had skin like polished stone, others floated in personal atmospheres of colored gas, and a few communicated through silent pulses of bioluminescence. All eyes, real or otherwise, turned toward the center of the chamber. There, on a small circular platform suspended by unseen forces, stood a single human. He wore no armor, carried no weapon, and his plain gray uniform bore only a small Earth insignia on the shoulder. His name was Elias Rourke, and he was the only representative Earth had sent to face the judgment of the galaxy's highest authority. Above him, seated on a raised dais of interwoven energy filaments, the Speaker of the Council leaned forward. Orlan Vex was a being of pure light, shaped into a tall humanoid form that shimmered like heat over desert sand. His voice echoed not through sound, but directly into the minds of all present. Species designation, Homo sapiens, Orlan Vex intoned. You stand accused of violating the Prime Accord by deploying unauthorized temporal resonance fields near the Helios Rift. Your actions destabilized 3 star systems and endangered the Karathi breeding nebulae. How do you answer? A ripple of tension passed through the chamber. The Karathi envoy, a massive, multi-limbed creature with chitinous plates and glowing red eyes, let out a low hiss. Its mandibles clicked in anger. The Virelians, tall and crystalline, remained still, but their internal light flickered with concern. Everyone expected fear from the human. They expected pleading. They expected weakness, but Elias did not flinch. He stood straight, calm, and met the speaker's gaze without blinking. We deployed nothing, he said, his voice clear and steady, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. We merely observed what you all refused to see. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. No one moved. Even the ambient hum of the chamber seemed to pause. The Karathi envoy surged forward, its voice a guttural roar. Your primitive scans cannot comprehend galactic-scale harmonics. You meddled with forces beyond your understanding and nearly unraveled a sacred nursery of life. Elias turned slowly to face the Karathi. Then why, he asked, did your entire fleet retreat the moment our satellites pinged the Helios Rift with a 0.3-second harmonic echo? The Karathi froze. Its red eyes dimmed slightly. It had no answer. Orlan Vex shifted, his light form rippling. Explain yourself, human. Elias reached to his belt and activated a small device. A holographic star map bloomed above the platform, showing familiar constellations and distant nebulae. But this was no ordinary map. Thin, glowing threads pulsed through it. Lines of energy connecting every known civilization, every warp lane, every communication relay. You all assumed the galaxy's strength lay in firepower, Elias said, pointing to the threads. In shields, in numbers, in ancient treaties and unbreakable codes. But you ignored the weakest point of all, synchronization. He zoomed in on the Helios Rift. A single node glowed brighter than the rest. Every civilization in this chamber relies on the same cosmic background frequency, the echo of creation. Your quantum-entangled comms, tuned to it. Your warp drives, harmonized with it. Even your bio-neural networks vibrate along this one universal note. He paused, letting the words sink in. You built your empires on a single frequency, and never realized someone could change the key. Gasps rippled through the assembly. The Virelians' crystals chimed softly in alarm. The Zenthari diplomats, floating orbs of gas, swirled faster in agitation. The Karathi took a step back, its limbs twitching. Orlan Vex's light dimmed, then brightened sharply. You claim your species can alter this frequency? We don't claim, Elias said. We've already done it, the chamber erupted. Voices, spoken, telepathic, sonic, overlapped in confusion, outrage, and fear. Delegates shouted over one another. Some demanded immediate sanctions. Others called for Earth's isolation. A few began quietly calculating how vulnerable their own systems might be. But Elias remained still. He watched them panic, not with pride, but with quiet resolve. Humanity had not come here to boast. They had come to survive. For centuries, Earth had been seen as a backwater world, late to spaceflight, slow to unify, and hopelessly emotional compared to the cold logic of the Virelians or the rigid discipline of the Karathi. When humanity finally joined the galactic community, they were given observer status, barely tolerated, often mocked. Their technology was considered crude, their politics chaotic, their art strange. But what no one understood was that humanity's greatest strength was not in building bigger ships or stronger shields. It was in seeing patterns others ignored, in asking questions no one else thought to ask, in listening not just to words but to the silence between them. While other species perfected war, humans studied resonance. While empires expanded through conquest, Earth scientists mapped the faint hum of spacetime itself. They discovered that the universe wasn't just filled with matter and energy, it was filled with music. And every civilization, knowingly or not, danced to the same tune, until now. Elias let the hologram fade. "We didn't attack you," he said, his voice softer but no less firm. "We simply proved that your unity is also your vulnerability. And if Earth is ever threatened again, we won't just change the key, we'll stop the music entirely." The chamber fell silent once more. This time the silence was heavier. It was the silence of realization. Orlan Vex slowly rose. "You will remain in this chamber under guard. The council will deliberate." Elias nodded. He didn't resist as two armored enforcers, tall insectoid beings with mirrored carapaces, stepped onto the platform and flanked him. But as they led him away, he glanced back at the assembled delegates. Not with defiance, not with arrogance, but with a simple truth in his eyes. Humanity was no longer the weakest link. They were the tuning fork, and the galaxy would never sound the same again. 6 months before the trial in the Galactic Council chamber, deep in the frozen dark beyond Pluto, Dr. Lena Price floated inside a narrow observation pod bolted to the side of the deep resonance array. Outside, stars burned cold and distant. Inside, data streamed across every screen, numbers, waveforms, pulses of energy no human eye could see, but her instruments could hear like whispers in a storm. Lena wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a diplomat. She was a physicist who loved silence more than speech and patterns more than people. But what she found in that silence changed everything. The array had been built for one purpose: to listen. Not for alien signals or enemy fleets, but for the faint hum of spacetime itself, the background resonance left over from the birth of the universe. Scientists called it the echo of creation. Most believed it was just cosmic noise like static on an old radio. But Lena saw something else. She noticed that every time a ship jumped through warp space, the echo shifted, just slightly. When alien comms pulsed across light years, the echo rippled. Even the slow spin of neutron stars sent vibrations through it. It was as if the entire galaxy was tuned to a single invisible frequency. At first, she thought it was a glitch. Then she ran the numbers again. And again. Each time the result was the same. The galaxy wasn't just connected by trade routes and treaties. It was connected by sound. She called Admiral Cale Briggs the next day. He arrived at her lab on Luna Base with tired eyes and a cup of real coffee. Rare these days. He listened as she explained, her hands moving fast over holographic graphs. "It's not a signal," she said. "It's a foundation, like the lowest note on a piano. Everything else builds on top of it." Briggs frowned. "So what? We've known about background radiation for centuries." "This isn't radiation," Lena said. "It's resonance." And every advanced civilization in the galaxy, Korathi, Virelian, Zenthari, they all use technology that syncs with this frequency. Their warp drives? They don't just bend space, they ride the echo. Their quantum comms? They entangle particles using its rhythm. Even their AI cores pulse in time with it. Briggs set his coffee down. "You're saying if we mess with this frequency, their whole system could fail?" "Not fail," Lena corrected. "Stutter, misfire, lose sync. Imagine an orchestra where every musician suddenly hears a different tempo. No crash, just chaos." Briggs was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Can we control it?" Lena looked at him. "We can't create it, but we might be able to nudge it." That was how Project Cadence began. Not with weapons, not with war plans, but with a single question. What if humanity could change the key of the universe? They didn't build bombs. They built a tuning fork. Hidden inside a hollowed-out comet in the Oort cloud, the Cadence engine was no bigger than a shuttle. It had no weapons, no shields, no engines. It didn't even need power. All it needed was perfect timing. Using Earth's global network of seismic sensors, lunar observatories, and deep space probes. Lena's team could detect the exact moment the echo reached its most receptive state, once every 73 hours. At that moment, the engine could emit a micropulse, so faint it would be lost in cosmic noise, but strong enough to shift the frequency by a fraction of a percent. It was the ultimate stealth weapon. Not because it hid, but because no one would believe it existed. Then the Karathi came. They arrived without warning. 3 dreadnoughts, black as void, slid into the edge of the Sol system. They demanded Earth pay tribute, minerals, data, and full access to human genetic archives. When Earth refused, the Karathi moved toward Mars, threatening to glass the colonies. Panic spread through Earth's command centers, but Lena didn't panic. She checked the clock. The next resonance window was in 12 minutes. Do it, Briggs said. At 03:47 Galactic Standard Time, the cadence engine pulsed. Nothing exploded. No beams fired. But across the Sol system, strange things happened. The Karathi flagship, preparing to fire its plasma lances, suddenly materialized 3 kilometers off course, inside the path of its own support cruiser. The 2 ships didn't collide. They phased through each other for 0.8 seconds, their matter streams overlapping in a nightmare of quantum interference. When they restabilized, half their crew were fused with bulkheads and their navigation cores were spitting out nursery rhymes in dead languages. Their comms network collapsed. Not from hacking, but because every signal arrived out of sync, like a phone call where the words come before the dial tone. The Karathi fled, calling it a cosmic anomaly, but their top scientists knew better. They ran diagnostics for weeks. They found no weapon signatures, no energy spikes, no trace of sabotage. Only a tiny, impossible shift in the universal background frequency, 0.32% off standard, they told the Council. No one believed them, until it happened again. A Varelian data vault near Proxima Centauri corrupted overnight, not from a virus, but because their crystal memory lattices vibrated at the wrong pitch, scrambling centuries of history into abstract art. Then a Zenthari atmospheric processor on their homeworld inverted its gas mix, turning breathable air into a slow-acting toxin. Again, no attack. Just a whisper of wrongness in the fabric of reality. Rumors spread. Whispers of a silent weapon, of a species that didn't fight with fire but with frequency. The Council demanded answers. Earth denied everything, but they sent Elias Rourke not to lie but to show them the truth. Back in the present, as Elias stood alone in the judgment chamber, he knew the Council wouldn't understand at first. They were too used to thinking in terms of fleets and firepower. But Lena's discovery had already changed the game. Humanity hadn't won through strength. They'd won by listening, and now the galaxy had to listen too. While the Council debated, Lena watched from Earth. She sat in her quiet lab, sipping tea, staring at a live feed of the chamber. She didn't feel pride. She felt responsibility, because she knew the cadence engine was just the beginning. If someone else learned how it worked, if a warlike species like the Marathi hegemony ever got hold of the principle, they could do far worse than cause glitches. They could silence the echo entirely, and without it, every warp drive, every comms array, every life support system synced to the old frequency would fail at once. Civilization would collapse not with a bang, but with a wrong note. That was why Elias had to make them understand. Not to fear humanity, but to respect the balance. As the enforcers led him away, Elias glanced once at the ceiling, as if he could see through rock and space to the quiet woman in her lab, still listening to the hum of the universe. He didn't smile, but he knew. The weakest point in the galaxy wasn't a shield, a planet, or a weapon. It was harmony, and humanity had just learned how to conduct it. The Galactic Council chamber was quiet for 3 full days after Elias Rourke's statement. No votes were taken, no rulings issued. The envoys stayed in their quarters, speaking only in hushed tones, their private channels buzzing with encrypted panic. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's most powerful beings did not know what to do. Orlan Vex, the speaker, sat alone in the central spire of the asteroid fortress, reviewing every piece of data Earth had ever transmitted. He replayed Elias's hologram again and again. The glowing threads, the pulsing note at the Helios rift, the calm certainty in the human's voice. It made no sense. Humans had only achieved warp flight 80 years ago. Their technology was crude, their society unstable. And yet they had uncovered a flaw in the very foundation of galactic civilization. On the fourth morning, Orlan Vex called an emergency session. Elias was brought back to the chamber, still unguarded, still wearing the same gray uniform. The Karathi envoy glared at him but said nothing. The Varelians stood perfectly still, their crystalline forms reflecting the chamber's soft light like mirrors. The Zenthari orbs hovered lower than usual, their usual swirls slowed by worry. "You claim your species can shift the universal resonance," Orlan Vex said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Prove it." Elias didn't argue. He simply nodded to a small device on his belt. A new hologram appeared, not of star maps but of real events. First, the recording of the Korathi fleet near Mars. Not the official report, but raw sensor logs from their own ships. You could hear the confusion in their comms as navigation failed, as weapons locked onto their own hulls, as time itself seemed to stutter. Then came the Varelian archive collapse, security footage showing their memory crystals shattering not from impact, but from internal vibration gone wrong. Finally, the Zenthari atmospheric disaster, a live feed from their homeworld's control center, as alarms blared and engineers stared in horror at readouts showing breathable air, turning toxic for no physical reason. "This wasn't sabotage," Elias said. "It was a side effect. A tiny shift, less than 0.5%. You built your entire civilization on one note. We just played a different one." The chamber fell into stunned silence. The Karathi envoy lowered its head. The Varelians chimed softly among themselves. Even Orlan Vex's light dimmed slightly. Then the Zenthari delegate spoke, its voice a soft rush of gas. "If this is true, then no one is safe. Not even your own people." Elias shook his head. "We shielded Earth first. Our systems run on dual-frequency protocols now. We don't rely on the old echo alone. We added a second tone, ours. It's not perfect, but it's ours." That was the moment the Council truly understood. Humanity hadn't just found a weakness. They had built a new way to live inside it. But not everyone accepted it. Later that night, as Elias rested in a simple guest chamber carved from asteroid rock, a message arrived. It wasn't from the Council. It was from a small delegation of the Trell, a minor species from the Outer Rim. They had no fleet, no voting power, and barely enough ships to maintain their trade routes. But they had watched everything. They asked for a meeting. Elias agreed. In a quiet alcove far from the main chamber, 3 Trell representatives met him. They were small, with soft gray skin and large dark eyes that blinked slowly. Their leader, a female named Mira, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "We have suffered under the Council's rules for generations," she said. "They tax our worlds, control our comms, decide who lives and who starves. But if what you say is true, if the frequency can be changed, then maybe we don't have to obey them anymore." Elias looked at her. "We're not offering rebellion." "No," Mira said. "You're offering balance. Teach us how to tune our own systems. Not to attack, just to be free." Elias didn't promise anything, but he gave her a data chip, encrypted, simple, containing only the basics of dual-frequency shielding. Nothing about the cadence engine, nothing about shifting the echo, just enough to protect their ships and comms from sudden disruptions. Word spread fast. Within a week, envoys from 5 other minor species requested similar meetings. They came not with threats but with offers. Rare minerals, ancient star charts, bioengineered crops that could grow in dead soil. All they wanted in return was knowledge. Not weapons, not power, just the chance to survive on their own terms, the Council noticed. And they were afraid. Orlan Vex called Elias again. This time his light was sharp, almost angry. "You are fracturing the unity of the galaxy," he said. "Unity built on a single point of failure isn't unity," Elias replied. "It's fragility." Before Orlan could respond, an alarm blared through the chamber. Red lights pulsed along the walls. A deep, resonant tone echoed, reserved only for existential threats. A new message scrolled across the central display. The Marathi hegemony was coming. Unlike the Karathi or the Varelians, the Marathi had never joined the Council. They existed outside it, a warrior species that believed in strength above all. They had conquered over 200 worlds. They had never lost a battle. And they did not believe in frequencies, echoes, or human tricks. Their message was simple: surrender the cadence engine, or Earth will be erased. The council turned to Elias, expecting fear, but he only nodded slowly. They think they're immune, he said quietly. They've built null field drives that operate outside known physics. No warp harmonics, no quantum comms, just brute force. Orlanvex's light flickered. Then you cannot stop them. Elias looked out through the transparent wall of the chamber toward the stars. Maybe not, but we don't have to stop them. We just have to make them listen. Back on Earth, Lena Price received the alert. She didn't panic. She opened a secure channel to Admiral Briggs. The Marathi don't use the echo, she said, but nothing in this universe is truly silent. Even their null fields create anti-resonance. That's still a vibration, just inverted. Briggs understood immediately. So if we flood the area with random noise, their sensors will overload. Their precision will fail. They rely on perfect control. Chaos is their weakness. Lena began working, not on the cadence engine, but on something new. Thousands of microsatellites already in orbit around Mars were reprogrammed. Each would emit a different random harmonic pulse. No pattern, no rhythm, just noise. It wouldn't shift the echo. It would drown it out. As the Marathi fleet approached the inner system, humanity prepared not for war but for confusion. Elias, still on the Council asteroid, watched the reports come in. He knew the real test was coming. The Karathi had been a warning. The Varelians, a lesson. But the Marathi? They were the final exam, and humanity had studied hard. That night, as the first Marathi dreadnought entered Martian orbit, Elias stood alone in his chamber, staring at the stars. He thought of Lena, of Briggs, of the billions on Earth who didn't even know what was happening. He thought of Mira and the Trell, hoping for a better future. He didn't pray. He didn't hope. He simply waited, because the galaxy's weakest point wasn't a weapon or a shield. It was the belief that everything had to stay the same, and humanity had already changed it. The Marathi armada arrived not with fanfare but with silence. Their ships were black, smooth, and shaped like blades. No lights, no comms, no emissions of any kind. They moved through space like shadows, cutting through the solar winds without a ripple. They did not broadcast threats. They did not demand surrender. They simply appeared in orbit around Mars, and the message came through every human channel at once, spoken in perfect, cold English. Surrender the cadence engine or be unmade. Earth's leaders gathered in the global command bunker beneath Geneva. Panic flickered in their eyes. The Marathi had never been defeated. Their null field drives made them immune to known weapons. Their armor could withstand supernova-level blasts. And now they were at humanity's doorstep. But Admiral Cale Briggs did not order an evacuation. He did not call for last stands or final broadcasts. He turned to Dr. Lena Price, who stood calmly at the back of the room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the main display showing the Marathi fleet. "Are we ready?" he asked. Lena nodded. "They think they're outside the system. But everything that exists vibrates, even silence." She gave the order. Across the Sol system, thousands of tiny satellites, no bigger than a human hand, activated. They had been launched years ago as part of Earth's deep space monitoring network, scattered near Mars, the asteroid belt, even trailing behind Jupiter. Now each one began emitting a unique harmonic pulse. One played a low drone, another a high chirp, a third a random series of clicks. There was no pattern, no rhythm, just pure chaotic noise. To human ears it would have been unbearable. To alien sensors tuned to the universal echo, it was worse than noise, it was madness. The Marathi flagship, the Dreadmaw, began its final approach toward Mars. Its targeting systems locked onto Earth's orbital defenses. Its weapons charged. Then, without warning, its navigation display flickered. The stars outside its viewport seemed to shift. The planet below appeared in two places at once. The captain of the Dreadmaw barked orders, but his crew could not respond. Their neural implants, designed to sync with the ship's systems, were receiving conflicting signals. Some saw fire. Others saw ice. One officer screamed that time was running backward. The fleet's formation broke. Ships drifted off course. Two collided not from impact, but because their null fields misaligned, causing their matter streams to briefly occupy the same space. The result was not an explosion, but a silent unraveling, hulls dissolving into shimmering dust. Then came the masterstroke. Lena didn't just flood space with noise. She introduced a second frequency, a new echo tuned only to human systems. It was soft, steady, and woven into Earth's own networks. But to the rest of the galaxy, it was a foreign note in a familiar song. And the galaxy began to choose sides. Varelian comm stations near the border suddenly lost contact with their homeworld. Their crystals could no longer resonate with the old echo. They had to decide, recalibrate to the new tone or go silent. The Karathi fleet, still recovering from their earlier encounter, found their warp drive stuttering. Their only choice was to accept Earth's dual-frequency protocol or risk another disaster. Trade routes froze. Data streams broke. The galaxy's unity, built over millennia on a single harmonic foundation, began to fracture into competing tones. Back on the Council asteroid, Elias watched the chaos unfold on a private screen. Orlan Vex entered his chamber without announcement, his light form dim and flickering. "You've broken everything," the speaker said, not with anger, but with awe. "No," Elias replied. "We showed you it was already broken. You just didn't want to see it." Orlan was silent for a long time. Then he asked, "What do you want?" "Survival," Elias said. "Not dominance. Not revenge. Just the right to exist without fear. And the right to protect ourselves in the only way we can, by understanding the universe better than those who would destroy us." On Mars, the Marathi flagship drifted helplessly toward the gravitational shear of Phobos. Its engines failed. Its shields collapsed. It did not explode. It simply tore itself apart, piece by silent piece, as the moon's gravity pulled it in different directions at once. The rest of the fleet retreated, not in rage, but in confusion. For the first time in their history, the Marathi had faced an enemy they could not crush, could not outthink, could not even understand. They left a message behind, not in words, but in action. They powered down their weapons and broadcast a single, steady tone, the first note of the new echo. It was not surrender. It was respect. On Earth, celebrations were quiet. There were no parades, no victory speeches. People simply went home, hugged their families, and looked up at the stars with new eyes. Lena stood on the roof of her lab, watching the night sky. She knew the danger wasn't over. The cadence engine still existed. Others would seek it. Others would try to copy it. But now the galaxy knew the truth. Strength wasn't in being the loudest. It was in knowing when to change the song. In the council chamber, the envoys gathered again. This time they did not sit in judgment. They sat in discussion. The Karathi asked for help recalibrating their drives. The Varelians offered to share their crystal resonance techniques in exchange for Earth's dual-frequency shielding. Even the Xanthari proposed a joint task force to map the new harmonic landscape. Elias stood among them, not as a prisoner, not as a defendant, but as a partner. He said little. He listened more, because the real victory wasn't in defeating the Marathi. It was in making the galaxy realize that unity didn't mean sameness, safety didn't mean control, and weakness, when understood, could become the greatest strength of all. As the session ended, Orlan Vex approached Elias one last time. "The Council will offer you permanent observer status," he said, "with full voting rights on matters of galactic resonance." Elias nodded. "And the right to tune the network during emergencies." Orlan hesitated, then agreed. Yes, it wasn't peace, not yet. But it was a start, and in the quiet hum of the chamber, beneath the pulse of alien hearts and human breath, a new note began to sound. One that carried the weight of survival, the wisdom of listening, and the quiet courage of a species that refused to be erased. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply taught it how to hear. 1 year after the Marathi retreat, the Galactic Council chamber looked different. The obsidian wall still pulsed with soft light, but now human-made resonance dampeners lined the upper balconies, humming gently to keep the chamber's acoustics stable. The tiered seats were still filled with envoys from across the galaxy, but the air no longer carried tension. It carried conversation. Real conversation. Not demands, not threats, but questions, offers, and shared concerns. Elias Rourke stood not on the defendant's platform, but beside the speaker's dais. He wore the same simple gray uniform, though now it bore a small silver pin. a gift from the Varelians, shaped like two overlapping waves. Below him, delegates from over 200 species negotiated not with bluster, but with frequency-sharing protocols. The Karathi had rebuilt their fleet using dual harmonic drives. The Zenthari had redesigned their atmospheric processors to accept both the old echo and the new tone. Even the Myrathi, once silent and feared, now sent a quiet observer, a tall, scarred warrior who spoke only to ask technical questions about resonance shielding. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been recalibrated. Orlan Vex, still the speaker, turned to Elias during a quiet moment between sessions. His light form shimmered with something that might have been respect. "You could have ruled us," he said, his voice echoing softly in Elias's mind. "One twist of your engine and every ship, every city, every life support system would have bent to your will." Elias shook his head. "That's not why we did this. We didn't want to rule. We just wanted to survive. And survival means making sure no one can ever erase us again. Not with fleets. Not with laws, not with silence." Later that day, Elias took a shuttle to the observation deck on the far side of the asteroid fortress. There, floating in a transparent bubble overlooking the stars, he found Lena Price. She stood with her hands in her pockets staring out at the endless dark. She hadn't changed much. Still quiet, still thoughtful, still more comfortable with data than people. "They asked me to join the new Harmonic Oversight Committee," she said without turning. "The Varelians want me to help design universal shielding standards. The Karathi offered me a research station near their nebula." "And?" Elias asked. "I said no," she replied. "I'm going back to Earth. There's still so much to listen to. The oceans, the wind, the quiet between heartbeats. The galaxy is loud, but Earth still has silence." Elias smiled faintly. "They'll keep asking." "Let them," she said. "We showed them their weakness so they'd finally see our strength. Not in weapons, but in understanding. And listening." Below them, a new signal pulsed through the galactic network. It wasn't the old echo, it wasn't humanity's tone alone. It was a blend, the deep chime of Varelian crystals, the rhythmic hum of Karathi bioengines, the soft sigh of Zenthari gas harmonics, and beneath it all, the steady, grounding pulse of Earth's own resonance. It was messy. It was imperfect. But it was alive. Back on Earth, cities had not changed much on the surface. Children still played in parks. Farmers still worked the fields. But deep underground, in labs and observatories, a new generation of scientists studied not just space but sound. They learned how to weave frequencies like thread, how to build systems that could adapt, how to live in a universe that was never truly still. The cadence engine still existed, hidden in its comet shell at the edge of the solar system. But it was no longer a weapon. It was a safeguard, a last resort to be used only if the galaxy ever again tried to silence Earth. And now, thanks to the agreement signed in the council chamber, any attempt to attack Earth would disrupt the entire network. The galaxy had learned harming humanity meant harming themselves. Even the Myrathi had changed. Their observer, a warrior named Torv, had stayed behind after the emergency session. He now worked with Earth engineers, helping design hulls that could withstand harmonic stress. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was always to ask, "Why did you not destroy us when you could have?" Elias had answered simply, "Because strength isn't about destruction. It's about choice." Torv had nodded, as if that made perfect sense. In the months that followed, small ships from minor species began visiting Earth, not for trade, but for knowledge. The Trell came first, led by Mira, who brought seeds from her homeworld that could grow in Martian soil. Others followed, each offering something unique, each asking only to learn how to protect themselves in a universe that was no longer predictable. Humanity did not give them weapons. They gave them understanding, and in return the galaxy gave humanity something it had never had before. Respect, not fear. Not pity, not curiosity. Real respect. As the year ended, Elias stood once more in the council chamber. This time not as a representative, but as a guest. The session was about something small, a dispute over mining rights near a resonance-sensitive nebula. But the way it was resolved mattered. Instead of voting by power, they voted by harmony. Each species adjusted their claims to avoid disrupting the local frequency. It was slow. It was complicated, but it worked. Afterward, Orlan Vex approached him one last time. The galaxy will never be the same, the speaker said. No, Elias agreed, and that's a good thing. He boarded the shuttle back to Earth that night. As the ship left the asteroid fortress behind, he looked out the window at the stars. They hadn't changed, but the way the galaxy moved among them had. Humanity had not become the strongest species. They had become something rarer. They had become the listeners. And in a universe built on vibration, on rhythm, on song, those who truly listen are the ones who shape the music. Back on Earth, Lena stood on a hill outside Geneva watching the sunrise. The wind carried the sound of birds, of distant traffic, of life continuing as it always had. But if she listened closely, very closely, she could hear something else too. A faint hum, steady and warm, weaving through the air like a promise. It was the sound of balance. And for the first time in a long time, it was enough.